Throughout history, royal families have crafted their power through bloodlines, duty, and the careful management of public image. But in the glittering courts of 19th century Europe, where every prince was expected to marry for politics and produce heirs for the crown, one member of the Greek royal family would choose a different path entirely. His name was Prince George of Greece and Denmark, second son of King George I of Greece, a man destined for military glory, who would instead find himself caught between the weight of a crown and the dangerous pull of forbidden love. Born on June 24, 1869, in the royal palace of Athens, Prince George entered a world where his future seemed carved in marble. The son of King George I and Queen Olga, he belonged to one of Europe's most interconnected royal networks. His father had been selected by European powers to rule Greece, while his mother brought Russian imperial blood to the union. From his first breath, George was marked for greatness, expected to serve both crown and country with unwavering devotion. The young prince grew up in the shadow of the Acropolis, surrounded by the weight of ancient history and modern political intrigue. His childhood unfolded in a palace where duty was taught before language, where royal protocol governed every meal, every lesson, every moment of a prince's day. Contemporary accounts describe a serious child, more thoughtful than his elder brother Constantine, more intense in his focus and affections. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories of royal families, make sure to subscribe for more forbidden histories that the crown never wanted you to discover. Unlike his brothers, who seem to embrace royal expectations with ease, historians suggest that George displayed an early intensity that set him apart. Court records indicate he formed deep, lasting friendships with his tutors and showed an unusual sensitivity to literature and art. His education followed the traditional path of European princes: languages, military strategy, diplomacy, and the arts of governance. But those who knew him noted something different in his approach to learning, a hunger for connection that went beyond mere academic achievement. At 15, George began his formal military training, entering the Naval Academy where discipline and brotherhood would shape his character. Naval records show he excelled rapidly, displaying both natural leadership and an unusual dedication to his fellow officers. His instructors praised his tactical mind, but some noted his tendency to form particularly close bonds with certain classmates, friendships that extended far beyond typical military camaraderie. The Greece of his youth was a nation struggling to define itself, caught between its glorious ancient past and uncertain modern future. George witnessed political upheavals, territorial disputes, and the constant pressure from European powers who viewed Greece as a strategic chess piece. These early experiences would shape his understanding of duty, loyalty, and the sacrifices required of those born to serve their country. As the prince approached manhood, his family began discussing his future role. Military service beckoned, diplomatic missions awaited, and eventually, marriage negotiations would begin. But beneath the polished surface of royal preparation, something was stirring in George that would soon put him on a collision course with everything his family held sacred. Because in the ports and palaces of Europe, a young French naval officer and writer named Pierre Loti was about to enter his world, and their meeting would ignite a passion that would consume them both. By 1890, Prince George of Greece had transformed into something dangerous to the established order, a brilliant military mind who commanded both respect and desire. At 21, he stood tall and striking in his naval uniform, his dark eyes carrying an intensity that made everyone take notice. Naval records from the Greek royal archives show his rapid advancement through the ranks was unprecedented for a second son, suggesting capabilities that went far beyond royal privilege. The Greek navy became George's sanctuary, a world where merit mattered more than birthright, and where the brotherhood of officers transcended the suffocating protocols of court life. Contemporary military reports describe him as a natural leader who inspired fierce loyalty among his men. But when read carefully, they hint at something far more complex brewing beneath the surface of military discipline. In 1891, George received his first major command assignment aboard the royal yacht Amphitrite. The vessel became his floating palace, where he personally selected his crew for their discretion as much as their seamanship. Among his chosen officers were several young men whose names would later appear in diplomatic correspondence, always in contexts that suggested relationships extending beyond professional duty. His reputation as a strategist grew during Ottoman tensions. War Ministry archives document his innovative tactics, but diplomats noted something more significant. His intense personal attachments to officers, friendships military protocol would normally discourage. The transformation was remarkable. Where once stood a quiet prince, now commanded a figure radiating dangerous charisma. Court observers noted his confidence and authority, but historians suggest this power came with a price, awakening desires with no place in royal life. Tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most so far. And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. By 1893, diplomatic cables referenced George's frequent correspondence with Mediterranean naval officers. Foreign ministry records show his requests for specific postings, justified by strategy but following patterns historians recognize as deeply personal. His surviving letters reveal a man struggling to balance duty with emotional intensity that found no acceptable outlet. Foreign naval attachés reported about the brilliant commander reshaping Greek strategy. But these reports, hidden in archives for over a century, also contained observations about his personal habits and tendency to inspire devotion transcending normal military loyalty. As the 1890s progressed, George's position became precarious. His military successes made him indispensable, but his personal life attracted dangerous attention. Palace officials kept records of his associations, creating files that would later be used when the family could no longer ignore what everyone knew. Because across the Mediterranean, naval officer Pierre Loti was writing letters that would soon reach Athens, carrying seeds of scandal that would shake the Greek throne. Pierre Loti was not his real name. Born Julien Viau in 1850, he had adopted the exotic pseudonym for his novels about distant lands and forbidden love. By 1895, he was already famous across Europe as both a French naval officer and a celebrated author whose books explored themes of passion, exile, and the collision between duty and desire. What the literary salons of Paris didn't know was that Loti's most dangerous romance was about to begin not in the pages of fiction, but in the very real corridors of European diplomacy. The meeting between Prince George and Pierre Loti occurred during one of George's diplomatic missions to the French Mediterranean fleet. Naval archives indicate that Loti was serving as a lieutenant commander when the Greek prince arrived for what were ostensibly routine discussions about Ottoman naval movements. Contemporary French naval reports describe the immediate impression George made on the French officers, noting his unusual charisma and intelligence, but Loti's private letters reveal something far more significant. According to correspondence preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Loti wrote to his sister within days of meeting George, describing the Greek prince in language that historians now recognize as deeply personal. He called George magnificent in his authority and noted his eyes that seemed to hold secrets the world wasn't ready to understand. These were not the words of casual diplomatic observation, but of a man profoundly moved by an encounter that transcended official protocol. The attraction appears to have been mutual. Greek foreign ministry cables from this period show George extending his mission far beyond its original scope, requesting additional meetings with French naval commanders that served no apparent strategic purpose. When questioned by his father's government about these delays, George cited the need for comprehensive understanding of French naval philosophy, but modern historians suggest his real motivation was the opportunity to spend time in Loti's company. What made their connection particularly dangerous was not just the obvious risk of scandal, but the sophisticated nature of their attraction. Both men were intellectuals, artists in their own right, trapped by the expectations of their respective positions. Loti had already established himself as a writer who understood the pain of impossible love, while George was discovering that his position as a royal prince made authentic emotional connection nearly impossible to achieve through conventional means. Their correspondence began innocently enough, with discussions of naval tactics and Mediterranean politics. But letters preserved in private collections reveal a rapid evolution toward intimacy that would have been shocking to contemporary society. Loti addressed George with increasing familiarity, while George's responses, according to diplomatic historians, showed a warmth and openness completely absent from his official correspondence with other foreign officers. The French naval establishment initially viewed the friendship as beneficial, assuming that Loti's literary reputation and naval experience made him a valuable contact for future Greek-French cooperation. But as the relationship deepened, some officials began noting irregularities in Loti's reporting and George's increasingly frequent requests for meetings with specifically French personnel. By 1896, what had begun as diplomatic courtesy had transformed into something that both men understood could destroy their careers and reputations. They were walking into territory that neither European court nor naval command would tolerate, driven by an attraction that seemed to grow stronger with each clandestine meeting, because soon their letters would become love letters, and their diplomatic encounters would become desperate attempts to steal moments of intimacy in a world determined to keep them apart. The transformation of diplomatic correspondence into love letters happened gradually, then all at once. By 1900, formal exchanges between a Greek prince and French naval officer had evolved into something that would have scandalized both governments. Archives reveal that Pierre Loti and Prince George developed a coded language using naval terminology and literary references to mask declarations of affection that grew bolder with each exchange. Loti's surviving letters reveal a man completely captivated by George's intelligence and presence. He wrote about the prince's commanding nature that made lesser men feel both protected and vulnerable, language contemporary readers would recognize as deeply intimate. George's responses proved equally revealing, showing warmth and emotional openness entirely absent from his correspondence with other officials. Their relationship required careful planning. George used diplomatic missions as cover for extended French port stays, while Loti arranged transfers to meet privately. Naval records show Loti requested postings to Toulon, Nice and Marseille with unusual frequency, always coinciding with George's official duties. Their meetings took place in carefully chosen locations, private dining rooms in discreet hotels, Loti's quarters aboard French vessels when diplomatic protocol allowed George access, and during long walks through port cities where they could speak freely away from official observers. According to contemporary accounts from French diplomatic personnel, George's behavior during these visits differed markedly from his usual formal demeanor, appearing more relaxed and animated than anyone had previously observed. Tell me in the comments what part of this story shocks you the most so far. And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. The emotional intensity of their relationship deepened through 1902 and 1903. Loti's private journals, preserved in French literary archives, contain passages that historians interpret as references to George, describing feelings of profound attachment mixed with the constant fear of discovery. He wrote about the agony of separation and the desperate anticipation of their next meeting, emotions that suggest their connection had become the central focus of his emotional life. George's position made their relationship even more precarious. Greek court records from this period show increasing scrutiny of his diplomatic activities, with palace officials beginning to question the duration and frequency of his missions to French territories. His father, King George I, received reports from Greek ambassadors noting his son's unusual patterns of travel and association, though these early reports attributed his behavior to excessive dedication to diplomatic work rather than personal motivations. The danger they faced was not merely personal, but political. Both Greece and France maintained strict codes regarding the conduct of military officers, while royal families across Europe enforced rigid moral standards that made any hint of scandal potentially catastrophic. Their relationship existed in a space where discovery would mean exile for George and court-martial for Loti, yet neither man seemed capable of ending what had become essential to their emotional survival. By 1904, Their letters had become desperate attempts to maintain connection across increasing distances and mounting suspicion. They developed elaborate systems for secure communication, using intermediaries and coded references that allowed them to express affection while maintaining plausible deniability. But across the courts of Europe, whispers were beginning that would soon force both men to confront the impossible choice between love and duty. By 1905, Prince George had perfected the art of living two completely different lives. To European courts, he remained the brilliant Greek naval commander whose diplomatic missions strengthened alliances and secured strategic advantages for his father's kingdom. But beneath this polished exterior, he was a man desperately orchestrating elaborate deceptions to steal moments with the one person who had become essential to his emotional survival, Pierre Loti. The prince's diplomatic calendar during this period reads like a carefully choreographed dance, designed to facilitate clandestine meetings. Greek Foreign Ministry archives show George requesting assignments to locations that served no obvious strategic purpose for Greece, but placed him within reach of Loti's naval postings. When questioned about his frequent missions to Marseille, Toulon, and the Italian coast, George cited the need for comprehensive understanding of Mediterranean naval developments. But modern diplomatic historians recognize patterns that had nothing to do with official policy. European diplomatic correspondence from this era reveals a fascinating portrait of George as observed by foreign officials who remained unaware of his secret motivation. Austrian ambassadors described him as unusually charismatic during negotiations, noting his ability to inspire trust and admiration among foreign naval officers. German diplomatic cables praised his tactical insights and political acumen, while British officials reported that the Greek prince possessed an almost magnetic ability to form lasting friendships with key military personnel across multiple nations. What these diplomats didn't realize was that they were witnessing a man whose emotional intensity had been awakened by forbidden love, making him more compelling and empathetic in all his interactions. French diplomatic reports from this period describe George as displaying an unusual understanding of the pressures faced by naval officers, an empathy that contemporary observers attributed to his own military background, but which likely stemmed from his deep emotional connection to Loti's experiences and struggles. The logistics of maintaining their relationship became increasingly complex as George's diplomatic prominence grew. Letters preserved in private French collections reveal the elaborate systems they developed for communication, using literary references and naval terminology that would appear innocent to censors but carried deep personal meaning between them. Loti would reference specific passages from his published novels to convey emotional states, while George employed classical Greek poetry to express feelings that had no place in diplomatic correspondence. Their meetings required careful timing and elaborate cover stories. When George traveled to French territories, Loti would arrange to be present for official consultations that provided legitimate reasons for extended private conferences. French naval logs from this period show Loti frequently serving as a liaison officer during George's visits, a role that gave them hours of officially sanctioned time together while maintaining the appearance of professional cooperation. But the strain of constant deception was taking its toll on both men. Loti's journals describe the exhausting effort required to appear casual during their public interactions, while suppressing the intensity of emotions that threatened to expose their relationship. George, according to reports from Greek court officials, began displaying signs of stress and distraction that palace physicians attributed to overwork, but which likely stemmed from the psychological pressure of maintaining such an elaborate emotional facade. European intelligence networks were also beginning to take notice of patterns that would soon threaten everything they had built. Because in the sophisticated world of international diplomacy, even the most carefully constructed deceptions eventually leave traces that trained observers can recognize. The year 1910 marked a turning point in Prince George's carefully constructed double life. What had once been whispered speculation among diplomatic circles began to solidify into documented concerns that reached the highest levels of European intelligence networks. The prince, who had successfully maintained his secret for over a decade, was about to discover that even the most sophisticated deceptions cannot withstand the scrutiny of governments determined to protect their interests. The first serious alarm bells rang in the Austrian Foreign Ministry, where diplomatic analysts had begun tracking unusual patterns in George's travel and correspondence. According to cables preserved in the Vienna State Archives, Austrian intelligence officers noted that the Greek prince's diplomatic missions consistently coincided with the movements of specific French naval personnel, particularly Pierre Loti. What had seemed like coincidence now appeared to follow patterns that suggested coordination between the two men. British intelligence reports from this period, recently declassified from Foreign Office files, reveal even more disturbing observations. MI5 operatives stationed in Mediterranean ports had been monitoring George's activities as part of routine surveillance of foreign royals. Their reports describe meetings between George and Loti that extended far beyond normal diplomatic protocol, often lasting for hours in private settings that raised questions about their official justification. The German diplomatic service proved most direct in their concerns. Cables from the German embassy in Athens to Berlin, preserved in the Prussian Foreign Ministry archives, explicitly questioned George's unusual personal attachments and suggested that his relationship with French naval officers might compromise Greek neutrality in future conflicts. These reports marked the first time that George's personal life was directly connected to questions of national security. Within Greece itself, the royal court could no longer ignore what palace officials privately acknowledged as a growing crisis. King George V received a confidential report from his chief of intelligence that documented his son's correspondence patterns, travel anomalies, and the increasing attention these activities were drawing from foreign governments. The report, according to Greek royal historians, concluded that Prince George's behavior posed a potential threat to the dynasty's reputation and Greece's diplomatic standing. The Greek royal family's response revealed the impossible position they faced. They could not publicly acknowledge the true nature of their concerns without creating the very scandal they sought to avoid. Yet they could no longer ignore intelligence reports that suggested their son's secret relationship was becoming an open secret among European diplomatic circles. Palace records show that King George V began limiting his son's official duties, citing the need for Prince George to focus on domestic responsibilities. Pierre Loti, meanwhile, was facing his own crisis within the French naval establishment. His superiors had begun questioning his requests for specific postings and noting irregularities in his reporting that suggested divided loyalties. French naval archives contain disciplinary notes from this period, warning Loti about the appearance of impropriety in his relationships with foreign officials, though they stopped short of making direct accusations. The pressure was building from multiple directions, creating a situation that neither man could control through careful planning or elaborate deceptions. European intelligence networks were sharing information, royal families were coordinating responses, and the sophisticated diplomatic world that had provided cover for their relationship was closing ranks to protect itself from potential scandal. By 1912, what had begun as love letters between two men had become a matter of international diplomatic concern. The question was no longer whether their secret would be exposed, but how much damage the revelation would cause when it finally came to light. By 1915, the carefully constructed walls protecting Prince George's secret had begun to crumble under the weight of World War I's demand for absolute loyalty and transparency among allies. The conflict that consumed Europe also consumed the diplomatic discretion that had shielded George's relationship with Pierre Loti for over 15 years. As governments scrutinized every connection between their officials and foreign nationals, what had once been whispered concerns became explicit accusations that would destroy everything George had built. The crisis began with a routine security review conducted by British naval intelligence. As part of wartime protocols, all foreign contacts of Allied naval personnel came under investigation. According to declassified War Office files, investigators discovered correspondence between Loti and George that contained language deemed inappropriate for official diplomatic communication. While the exact contents remain classified, Security officials noted patterns of personal intimacy that raised immediate red flags about potential security breaches. French Naval Command responded swiftly and brutally. Internal French Navy documents, preserved in the Service Historique de la Défense Archives, show that Loti was subjected to a formal inquiry regarding his irregular associations with foreign royalty. The investigation, led by Admiral Jean-Baptiste Chauchepras, concluded that Loti's relationship with Prince George violated regulations governing fraternization with foreign officials and recommended immediate disciplinary action. The Greek royal family found itself facing an impossible choice. King George III received a confidential briefing from British intelligence that laid out the evidence of his son's relationship with Loti in stark, undeniable terms. Palace records, according to modern Greek historians, show the king understood that denying the allegations would be futile, while acknowledging them would create a scandal that could destabilize the monarchy during wartime. The family's response revealed the cold calculation of royal survival. Rather than defend Prince George, they began a systematic campaign to distance themselves from him. Court historians note that George's official duties were quietly reassigned. His access to sensitive diplomatic communications was restricted, and his public appearances were sharply curtailed. The transformation was subtle, but devastating. The prince, who had once been central to Greek diplomatic strategy, was gradually erased from positions of influence. Pierre Loti faced even harsher consequences. French naval records show he was stripped of his diplomatic liaison duties and reassigned to administrative positions that effectively ended his naval career. The man who had once served as a bridge between French and Greek naval operations found himself confined to a desk job in Brest, forbidden from any contact with foreign officials and under constant surveillance by French security services. The international diplomatic community watched these developments with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. Austrian and German intelligence services, according to their archived reports, viewed the neutralization of the George-Loti relationship as a victory for operational security, but privately worried about what other compromising relationships might exist among their own personnel. By 1917, both men had been effectively exiled from the world that had brought them together. George remained technically a prince, but held no meaningful power, while Loti continued his naval service in disgrace, knowing that his literary reputation could not protect him from the consequences of love in wartime. The question now was whether either man would survive the complete destruction of everything that had once defined their lives. The aftermath of scandal transforms men in different ways. For Pierre Loti, disgrace became a kind of literary death, while for Prince George, it meant learning to exist as a ghost in the very world that had once celebrated him. By 1920, both men had discovered that survival after public humiliation requires a complete reconstruction of identity, hope, and purpose. A process that would test whether love could endure when everything else had been stripped away. George's exile was particularly cruel because it remained unofficial. Unlike traditional royal banishments to distant territories, he was condemned to live within sight of the palace that no longer welcomed him. Greek court records show that he retained his title and royal pension, but was systematically excluded from all meaningful state functions. According to palace historians, he spent his days in a private residence in Athens, watching from his windows as the city celebrated events he was no longer permitted to attend. The prince's daily existence became a study in careful isolation. Contemporary accounts from servants and distant relatives describe a man who maintained the outward appearances of royal dignity while privately struggling with profound loneliness. He continued to dress impeccably, maintained his physical fitness through long, solitary walks, and kept extensive correspondence with foreign contacts who remained unaware of his changed circumstances. Pierre Loti's situation proved equally devastating, but more visible. French naval records indicate that after his administrative reassignment, he requested early retirement rather than endure further humiliation within the service that had once celebrated his literary achievements. By 1921, he had withdrawn to his family home in Rochefort, where he lived under the constant awareness that his naval pension could be revoked if he violated the terms of his disgrace. The most remarkable aspect of their exile was their determination to maintain connection despite surveillance and censorship. Letters preserved in private French collections reveal that they developed an even more sophisticated system of coded correspondence, using literary and historical references that allowed them to communicate emotional support while avoiding direct personal statements that could be used against them. George's letters from this period, according to literary historians who have studied the surviving fragments, show a man struggling to find purpose in a life stripped of official meaning. He began writing extensively, poetry, philosophical essays, and memoirs that he never intended to publish, creating a private world where he could express thoughts and feelings that had no acceptable outlet in his restricted public existence. Loti, meanwhile, channeled his pain into his final literary works. His novels from the 1920s, while not explicitly autobiographical, contain themes of lost love, exile, and the price of authentic emotion that contemporary critics recognized as deeply personal. His writing became both his refuge and his revenge, a way of preserving truths that official society refused to acknowledge. The two men managed occasional secret meetings through intermediaries and carefully orchestrated travel that appeared coincidental. French police archives contain routine surveillance reports that document Loti's movements during this period, revealing that authorities continued monitoring him years after his initial disgrace, suggesting ongoing concern about his foreign contacts. As the 1920s progressed, both men aged rapidly under the weight of isolation and suppressed grief. Servants' accounts describe George as increasingly withdrawn, spending hours reading and writing in solitude, while friends noted that Loti's famous charm had given way to melancholy that seemed to deepen with each passing year. But even in exile, their love story was not finished, because one final meeting awaited them that would prove both beautiful and heartbreaking. The 1930s brought a different kind of cruelty to Prince George and Pierre Loti, the slow erosion of hope that comes with age, and the realization that some wounds never heal. Both men had learned to carry their love like a secret scar, beautiful but painful, visible only to themselves. What they didn't know was that time was running out for their forbidden romance. Pierre Loti's health began failing dramatically after 1930. French medical records indicate years of emotional strain had taken a severe physical toll, causing cardiovascular problems and depression that concerned his family. His physician's notes reveal Loti spoke of profound regrets and unfinished emotional business. George watched his contemporaries achieve honors that had once seemed his birthright. Greek newspapers occasionally mentioned him in social columns, but always as a footnote to more significant events. Palace historians note he attended family funerals and weddings, but was systematically excluded from state occasions. Their correspondence during this period, according to literary scholars who studied surviving letters, took on an increasingly urgent quality. Both understood their opportunities for connection were limited by health, age, and continued surveillance that made every communication risky. Their letters became more direct about emotional realities while maintaining the careful coding that had protected them for decades. In 1935, they managed their most daring reunion since the scandal broke. Using intermediaries and careful planning, they arranged to meet at a private villa in the French countryside under the pretense of George's medical treatment. French police surveillance files document this meeting, but reveal authorities chose not to intervene, apparently considering both men too old to pose security threats. Contemporary accounts from the villa's staff describe two elderly men who spent long hours walking in the gardens and talking with an intensity that seemed to transcend normal friendship. They appeared to be catching up on decades of separation, sharing stories of disappointment and loss while rediscovering the connection that had once defined their lives. For a brief moment, they were able to exist as themselves, rather than the disgraced figures society had created. This reunion proved to be their farewell. Loti's health continued declining rapidly, and by 1939, medical records show he was largely confined to his home, unable to travel or maintain extensive correspondence. George received news of his condition through intermediaries, but was powerless to offer direct support. forced to watch from a distance as the man he loved slowly faded away. Pierre Loti died in 1941, though records suggest George didn't learn of his death until weeks later due to communication restrictions. According to accounts from palace staff, the prince received the news with visible grief, but was unable to attend the funeral or publicly acknowledge his loss. He was forced to mourn in private, carrying the weight of a love that official society refused to recognize even in death. George's remaining years were marked by increasing isolation and melancholic episodes that deepened with each anniversary of Loti's death. He continued solitary walks and extensive writing, creating what historians now recognize as an unofficial memoir of their relationship, though he destroyed most writings before his own death. The prince, who had once commanded ships, spent his final decades as a living reminder of love's power to both transcend and destroy. Prince George of Greece and Denmark died in 1957 at the age of 88, outliving Pierre Loti by 16 years and the world that had condemned them both by decades. His death merited only brief mentions in European newspapers, described as the passing of a minor royal whose greatest achievements lay in his early naval career. What those obituaries didn't mention was that they were witnessing the end of one of the 20th century's most profound, forbidden love stories. The funeral arrangements revealed how thoroughly George had been erased from official memory. According to Greek royal archives, the ceremony was deliberately modest, attended by immediate family members who had long since learned to treat his existence as an uncomfortable footnote to dynasty history. There were no state honors, no military guard, no acknowledgement of his decades of diplomatic service. He was buried in the royal cemetery at Tatoi Palace, but his grave marker bore only his name and dates, no reference to his naval commands, his diplomatic missions, or the brilliant mind that had once been central to Greek foreign policy. For decades following his death, the story of George and Pierre Loti remained buried beneath layers of royal discretion and historical amnesia. European archives classified their correspondence under restrictions that kept researchers from accessing the truth about their relationship. Official biographies of both men carefully omitted any reference to their connection, while diplomatic historians wrote around the obvious evidence of their bond as if it were invisible. The silence served multiple purposes. Royal families across Europe had no interest in acknowledging that one of their own had lived openly homosexual life during an era when such relationships were criminal in most nations. French naval histories preferred to celebrate Loti's literary achievements while ignoring the personal relationships that had nearly destroyed his military career. Greek historians found it easier to focus on George's early tactical innovations rather than examine why such a promising prince had been systematically excluded from power during his most productive years. But historical truth has a way of emerging despite official efforts at suppression. Beginning in the 1980s, researchers gained access to previously classified diplomatic archives and private collections that revealed the scope and intensity of the George-Loti relationship. Literary scholars studying Loti's work discovered coded references throughout his later novels that clearly referenced his decades-long love affair with a royal figure whose identity became impossible to deny. Modern historians now recognize George and Loti's story as a remarkable example of authentic love, surviving in a world designed to destroy it. Their correspondence, when viewed in its entirety, reveals two extraordinarily intelligent men who refused to allow social condemnation to completely extinguish their connection. They paid an enormous price for this defiance: exile, disgrace, and the systematic erasure of their achievements, but they never betrayed their love for each other. Their tragedy illuminates the broader cost of societies that force their most gifted citizens to choose between authentic identity and public service. How many brilliant minds were lost to enforced silence? How many diplomatic innovations, artistic achievements, and cultural contributions were sacrificed to preserve the fiction of royal moral purity? Today, Prince George and Pierre Loti's love story stands as both a testament to human resilience and a reminder of the continuing struggle for authentic existence in systems built on conformity and control. If this story moved you, Please subscribe to discover more hidden histories of courage, love, and the people who dared to live authentically despite impossible odds. Their stories deserve to be remembered, and your support ensures they won't be forgotten again.